And hi, everybody. It is Wednesday, December 5th, the end of the year and entering into the final 2 weeks, of course. Today, what we're going to do is a class based around misconceptions, myths, and some of the standard operating procedures or conventions that the wine industry has created that somehow we feel is good for selling wine, but very few people have taken any time to kind of critically rethink or think through the consequences of some of the things that we do day in, day out, some of the things that people associate with wine. And where this falls into the class is defining market and market strategies. I've mentioned several times that good consumer data is really hard to find. And we showed the Nielsen data and all these details that can be found or purchased that tell you about what wines have sold, at what prices, and those kind of things. And this is what I consider one of the major flaws in the wine industry, and an area that is a big opportunity for many, many people in the wine business. And I'll explain a little bit more as we go into this. And it's the disruptive side of me, disruptive in a positive sense, that how the wine industry defines the market is we judge people by the wines they drink and love. And hang on just 1 second. So what I mean by this is you could be a Parker person. You like Robert Parker points. You're being defined by your preference for a rating system. You could be defined, oh, I'm a red wine drinker. I love Chardonnay. And so in almost every industry, an incredible amount of effort is put into trying to understand and segment the market in a way that enables you to use what's called targeted marketing. All right, so you have a segment, you understand the segment and who's in there, and the more tightly defined the segment, the better your ability to get the right message, use the right language, use the right value systems, and so on. If you're making a high-end red wine that's going to sell for $100 or $50 even, or more a bottle, you've really got to consider, okay, what route am I going to take to that? Who is that market? What do they value? Well, you're going to find a very large proportion of that market, and the gatekeepers to that market will use the Robert Parker points. Whether they like it or not, they still often use it. You'll see it in the promotion of the wines. You'll see it in the materials. Now you and your business strategy might be screw Parker. I hate the 100-point system, and so I'm going to market my wine differently. Well, if you've got a product that's going into that realm, if that's your market segment, and you decide to take another course, then you better find out, are there enough people within that greater market opportunity that also would want this pushback and so forth. A very fun story, Jim Clendenin of Aubon Clement Winery years ago made a wine very specifically to mock Parker. It was a Chardonnay, it was super high alcohol, it was oaked over the top, and so on. And he did it kind of as a joke and in a way to push back, because his preference is for much more elegant styles, more restraint in alcohol, more restraint of oak and integration, that kind of stuff. but it was a huge success and it sold for a lot of money. So he's still producing it today. Anyway, so it's really hard to get a grasp of the market when you define the market and even disenfranchise or mock the market for the wines they drink. Oh, you know, they're box wine drinkers, or they're not even wine drinkers. And one of my pet peeves is how ignorant this attitude is. And what I mean by ignorant, it's ignoring what the history of wine in Europe and throughout history has been. And it's been mixed with fruit juices, with syrups, been made into vermouth and May wine and spritzers. And it can be said that if you take the history of wine, modern wine, the alcohol levels, the dryness and whatever, that's modern wines today do not represent what people drank in Europe 30 years ago, or many times even still today. So anyways, the context for today is looking at a macro environment of the world that is very arrogant and very ignorant. Now, not ignorant as in stupid, but ignoring history and traditions and replacing it with myths and lore and, frankly, BS, okay? What we're going to focus on today is why people are different. Have you ever noticed there are arguments between experts over alcohol levels, over extract, over oak? You've got two people judging wine sitting at the same table. This happened. Luckily, I avoided being on a judging panel with somebody in Southern Oregon early this year, but they were just so critical of everything. It was as if there's no such thing as good wine, and we were having all these really good wines. But they thought their job was to criticize, not to like celebrate wine. And inherently, what we've learned to do is pass on our wine criticism and judgments onto the people that drink certain wines. Oh, you know, they like that style of wine and so forth, okay? So also by doing this, it gives a much better opportunity. What's the total market for your product? What's the share that you anticipate getting? And if you take millennials, that's great. You've got 1 billion people to try and figure out. So what we're also working to create, and this is a business, this has been a passion of mine for many, many decades now, is a better ability to connect, to communicate, to build trust. And in doing so, these are all the things that you're looking to do as a business with your customers, is to have them have long-term business relationships where they recognize your brand, they have a positive association to it, and they want it on a regular basis. They want to share it with others, okay? So what we're going to do is enter into a realm of perception and wine preferences. About 30 years ago, I made a conscious decision, and this is all part of my Master of Wine learning and education, in particular going to a seminar on disruptive innovation and critical thinking. It's where I learned about critical thinking and a greater ability to understand the opinions and points of view of others. And so I started to work with perception sciences and scientists and food scientists outside of wine, not encumbered by the inherent bias of what is good wine or what is bad wine. And most of you have probably heard of umami and umami taste. I'm actually responsible for popularizing that concept and basically introducing that concept into the realm of wine and food 30 years ago. And at the time, people really, it was fascinating how angry people would be getting about saying, you know, out there in the sciences, they're talking about another primary taste It comes from glutamates and things called nucleotides, and in combination, that creates an intense umami taste. It's delicious. It's found in breast milk. It's in high levels. Human breast milk has 10 times more glutamate than cow's milk. We age food, we preserve food, we combine certain foods, and umami is fundamentally the taste of proteins and preservation, fermentation, or aging of different food products, okay? Most people who even teach about it today still don't really know what it is. And it's found in wine. The stirring of lees in a Chardonnay or extending maceration of red wine releases these compounds called nucleotides. And those, along with glutamate, create the real impact, which would give, just like we described Lee's stirred Chardonnays, a richer mouthfeel, a kind of a creaminess, a richness, sort of indescribable. But once you learn about umami, and of course now there's umami burger restaurants. In 2018 for the National Spelling Bee, umami was one of the regional final words, because you not only have to spell the words, you have to define them. So anyways, little did I know at that time that investigation would lead to every answer we found for something about perception or wine with food and this and that. We found numerous new doors to explore and so forth. So here we go. So perceptions, the ability to taste, smell, see, hear, or touch, makes us aware of something, okay? So perception is the act of becoming aware of something that you see, hear, taste, smell, or touch, all right? So like the perception of taste. And it's also, and this is kind of fascinating. We're going to talk about the fundamental building blocks of perception and how humans respond through perception to their environment, to their world, etc. And that is that there's also a mental impression. When you're thinking of a brand is a mental impression. It's impressing something. And remember, the word brand came from like a burning something into indelibly, making an indelible impression into wood or a convict or a slave or something to represent ownership or connection. All right. So it's kind of fascinating. These are the wonderful interrelationships that I love. Okay. All right. So long and short of it, everybody remembers the Sufi parable. You might not remember that it's a Sufi parable. S-U-F-I. I didn't. But the three blind men trying to describe an elephant, and one was at the leg and touching and perceiving the leg and said, "Oh, an elephant is like a tree." And the other says, "No, they're at the trunk," and said, "An elephant's, you know, like a snake." And the other one's at the tail saying, "No, it's like a rope." So who's right? Well, they all are, just like depends on which side of the nine you're sitting on. And what we kind of give lip service or a passing acknowledgement to, oh, yes, people have different palates or different tastes and this and that. But we really don't take it any further than that to understand why, and that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about why. All right. So what does wine represent? Okay. And inside of perception, you know, each individual has differences or different cultures, beliefs, knowledge. Some people don't drink. Some people think that wine is evil for religious purposes or just simply because it has alcohol. Wine represents arrogance and intimidation and overwhelm to a very, very large majority of people. And if we talk then about the macro environment of wine, every study ever done comes up with one of the largest ways to segment the macro global wine consumer base as overwhelming, intimidating, and arrogant. That's not good, you guys. That's where computing was 40 years ago. Oh, no, I don't do computing. You got to learn that code and you got to do all this. But the computing industry adapted to the consumer and said, hey, let us make this easier. Let's figure out how we can make this product fit into your life, right? So what we're going to do is to change the perspective so that you can say, oh, well, I know this person, they love these wines. Oh, I never knew this about them, all right? And that's what we're going to do. So, and my mission, you know, we talk about mission, vision, and values. My mission is to have the wine industry stop scaring the hell out of consumers. You know, here we are over in our head with the bananas and the, boy, start to read tasting notes that you see online and by bloggers and whatever. What are we doing? Because it really is. We're not communicating. And when we ourselves, we haven't done the validation, but it is known that I could take 5 wines, have somebody really, really expert write their descriptive notes, and then give the 5 wines to another equally expert person with the 5 notes, and they wouldn't be able to put them back together accurately and consistently. So we're all learning, and this is my bug with wine education in general. We're all learning this formulaic way of describing the wines, and then to make matters worse, we use those descriptions to match descriptions of food, and we call that wine and food pairing. And it's nothing of the sort. It has no basis in any reality. We're making it all up, and we'll talk about that too. All right. So, oh, no, we don't, you know, wine industry doesn't do that. We love wine consumers. No, we don't. So hopefully you can hear this. Everybody should, if by perception, if you've ever seen this show, you know this is Niles on Frasier. And Niles and Frasier are talking about somebody and whether there's any evidence that they're below average intelligence, that they're mentally unstable, that they're unfit, actually, and should be institutionalized. Okay, so they want to know if somebody's certifiably crazy. And they're looking for what is the evidence that's out there. So I'm going to play this and hopefully you can hear it. I'm going to turn the volume up so it'll maybe even go through the microphone. Let's find out. Here we go. Well, maybe we're not going to do this. Hang on. Aw. I have to find out why this is not working. Darn it. Oh, hang on. Here we go.
Borderline. Does she ever act delusional? Well, she often claims that she's responsible for the success of our show. Gilding. Does she display below average intelligence? She bought the order a bottle of white Zinfandel. Go to her, she's a threat to herself. And maybe even let the woman drive.
All right, so if you couldn't hear that, is she delusional? Is she below average intelligence? And what they used to confirm that Roz in this case was all of those things was she once ordered a bottle of white Zinfandel. And so millions and millions of white Zinfandel drinkers see this. My mother-in-law is a white Zinfandel lover. She is nothing like what the wine industry and possibly you think she is, because she's a PhD in economics. She was a pro tour golfer. She's a millionaire. She's brilliant, bright, and really smart, and the wine industry doesn't understand her. So her behavior, because of our attitude about the wine she drinks. And of course, she's trailer trash and she's unsophisticated. None of these things are true. But we've ensured that when she goes out to a restaurant, she will not even consider ordering wine. And she is representative of millions and millions of people in the US, in the UK, in France, in Italy, all through Europe, South America, and even more so in Asia, because she has the most taste buds. She's very sensitive to alcoholic burn genetically. She likes low alcohol sweet wines because of her actual number of taste buds and her bitter sensitivity. And we've got it all wrong. We've just got it all wrong. So creating value and retaining customers is really about understanding the market. And how big is the market? Then targeting your potential customers. Oh, I'm going to make a super high-end red wine that's going to sell for $60 or $100 or $150 a bottle, and I'm going to target the people who are like me and don't like Parker or don't like the Wine Spectator and so on. Great. And I'm not saying don't do that, but understand you just took your market and shrunk it way down. Because when you go to the restaurants and you're trying to sell it, you may get somebody who poo-poos Parker scores and that, but at the end of the day, they're going to want something that they could use on their wine list or in the story that could be used to sell, or that thing on the shelf, that little card that says, 94 points, Wine Spectator, Wine Enthusiast, whatever, okay? And then differentiating your product. I'm hoping you're doing some of your homework and going through and seeing how much everybody is saying the same thing. And so at the end of the day, what's anybody really doing to position their wine in the mind of the consumer? All right, so creating value and retaining customers is the segmentation, dividing the market into smaller segments. It's then targeting the segment, and then inside of that, differentiating what you're selling from what other people are selling, and positioning it, that impression, that perception in the mind of the consumers. Oh, I recognize that label, I recognize that name, I recognize that product, I want more of it, okay? And that's basically what we're trying to do. Now, what I'm trying to do with all this, and I invite you guys to join, is creating a wine industry that's consumer focused and a wine culture as well, because we pass these things on to people who are not in the trade or the business, and that's very unfortunate. And then that expands this dominance and this tyranny of the minority of arrogant wine people who perpetuate the myths, the misinformation. So if you understand the market and say, hey, I got you, love you for being a wine consumer, how can I help you? And then once you understand and embrace them, then you can start to cultivate it. I get it. Have you ever tried that wine with a steak? I know you love this Viognier that I make, and it's absolutely delicious. And honestly, in Europe, in France, in Italy or Spain, if they were having lamb or they were having beef or whatever, you would be drinking the wine that you love or the wine that you have every day. You're not picking a certain wine to go with the steak. That's a figment of our imagination. We're ignoring that. That's the ignorance that I'm talking about, okay? All right, so this is what it becomes to, is if you can engage your customers, and that's people in the tasting rooms, people in a retail store, people flipping through things online, wherever it is, by initiating what we call a new conversation, and then listening to them and their preferences to find the prompts for what direction to go, and then guide people to the right selections. Again, whether it's, oh, here, go to this section on our page, these are the wines you're going to love the most, or welcome to our tasting room, where do we want to start? Okay, what kind of wines do you love? Let me have you try these. All right, now do you love the same things? Do you like something different? Oh, try these. And it's personalizing it and engaging and building trust. And it's trust that equals that retention. So the conversion is that they're going, wow, this is a different conversation. They're actually listening to me. I really love this, and I want more of this, okay? All right. So Martin Luther King is one of my favorite quotes. Nothing in the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity. So I'll be referring to these several times. So, and here's an example. Oh yes, steak really is best with a red wine. Now, this kind of ignores the fact that a lot of people don't like red wine. And of course, the antithesis, oh, if it's a delicate fish, that the red wine's going to overpower the fish and whatever. Actually, these things, for the most part, don't happen. We've made them all up. And we actually we learn to ignore trying things because we're so focused on finding the right wine or making the right pairing. All right. And then conscientious stupidity, that's another realm, but it's equally out there and valuable. All right. So if you think that the person sitting next to you is seeing the exact same things that you're seeing or hearing or tasting or smelling, you're wrong. We are all individually, biologically, genetically different. If I'm occupying this space and this experience is happening for me, it goes back to the two people simultaneously looking at a number. And for one person, it's clearly a 9, and the other, it's clearly a 6. So part of what's increasingly the problem is there's languages. Oh, do you smell the olala berries, or do you smell the zucchini blossoms, or whatever in the wine, as if everybody should smell those things. Or somebody says, oh, this wine really burns, so the alcohol's too high, it's too hot, and somebody else is like, what are you, crazy? So we don't even experience the same sensations from the exact same sources. And we've got this pretense, oh, did you smell this? Now, sometimes a prompt will spur things neurologically and whatever, but to truly understand this, you really have to get that we're each individual. And we start with what we call phenotypes. We took the word phenotype, and a phenotypes is a genetic factor, and genomes and genotypes are defined specifically by the genetics, and as in the realm of genomics and genetics, your ability to see, whether you need glasses or not, maybe you're colorblind, maybe you're really sensitive to light, etc., is all dictated by your genetics. That creates your completely unique fingerprint, if you will, of taste buds, olfactory receptors, certain neurological aspects of transmission of information, and so on. Okay, so hopefully that's clear. Then to the phenotype is not only, it's an organism defined by a genetic basis, but then differentiated over time by adaptation to environment and even physiological changes that can occur, but certainly behavioral and psychological. So the two things that make us all who we are is our combination of genetics and life experiences, learning, and preferences. Oh, what am I supposed to be smelling? Oh, you should smell cassis. Oh yeah. You don't even know what a cassis is. Then you find out it's a berry, but you learn that, and maybe then you start to add that. You've adapted, you've mutated in effect, psychologically and neurologically. Okay, so this is who we are and what we do on an individual. Now, here's what most people are surprised by: how many taste buds does one person have versus another, and what's the range? It's huge. There are people that have, it looks like when you magnify taste buds, it looks like there's taste buds on top of taste buds. Now, a taste bud is sort of a physiological feature, and taste receptors on a taste bud are actually what receive. But the range of number of taste buds goes from less than 500 to over 11,000 in different individuals. Now, this is an oversimplification. We know this, but our research goes into this in more and more depth, because you can have same number of taste buds, one person has more receptors on each taste bud. The range is from 9 to like 21. So there's a lot of variables, but we know that how people experience certain things pertaining to taste is highly dependent on the number and the type of receptors that they've got. And big differences. This is not small, all right? Then there's also things in genetics that seem to give either specific molecules or groups of molecules different impressions based on the types of receptors, as we had just mentioned. And the things that we're starting to look at, virtually everybody knows somebody with the cilantro gene. The cilantro gene it's actually a cluster called OR6A2. And if you've got that cluster, all of a sudden cilantro's not this tolerable, I can learn to like it kind of thing. It's horrible, it's disgusting. You will never learn to like it. You just won't. And if you don't understand that, then you live in the sincere ignorance of, oh, I didn't like it when I tried it. You'll learn to like it. We force this on our kids a lot. And this is my primary research colleague is a board certified pediatrician. So we're able to compare notes on kid behaviors and wine drinker behaviors, and sometimes how wine drinkers behave like a bunch of kids. But this is so cool. And but as your palate matures, your palate's not changing much, by the way. That's urban myth. From the time you're 4 years old, the changes are neurological, not in your palate. Oh, but I didn't used to like cilantro. I learned to like it as my palate matured and sophisticated. Julia Child hated it forever. She couldn't stand it. She was actually quoted many times, if she found it in food, she'd pick it out and throw it on the floor, or if it was chopped up or infused into the dish, she would have to just send the dish back. She couldn't eat it, right? And this happens for sweetness, this happens for alcohol. Seems there's 3 basic variations for alcohol burn, and if you do not have the receptors as part of, I think it's the TRPV1, because alcohol burn is touch, not taste. Hot, spicy chilies is touch, not taste. And if you have the lowest number of taste buds usually corresponds to a higher tolerance for things like alcohol. They don't have the specific alcohol burn receptor, and alcohol tastes sweet to this group of people. It does. Scotch, bourbon, vodka, whatever. What are you complaining about? Wine 16, 17% alcohol with lots of tannin, no problem. So we don't know specifically, but we think that Robert Parker fits in this model. And then his 100-point system and his values of what those wines should be are perfect for that market. And it's kind of an accidental finding of the market, but there you go. And that's why so many people start out with the Parker scores and then kind of get tired or find the wines are too much, because if you've got one incidence of the gene for alcohol burn, it burns and it can become unpleasant, but it's usually tolerable and you can adapt to it. And then there's the third group of people that have two incidences. They're called SNPs, SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphism. If you've got two SNPs for the alcohol burn, if you get over 13, 14% alcohol, it's intolerable. That's my mother-in-law. That's actually my research colleague, who is a board-certified pediatrician, a sensory scientist. She went to medical school in France, is as brilliant as the day is long, and she loves white Zinfandel and Moscato, just like my mother-in-law. So this is, you know, we just got it wrong on how we look at consumers, and we also have it wrong in how we look at the history of wine. And the French always love sweet wines. So then the neurology part of it, we refer to it as neural gastronomic programming, sort of like neuro-linguistic programming. You have a sensory stimulation. Cognition is that point where awareness happens. Oh, something's here, or I see something. Then we evaluate it, and these, most often this is nanoseconds. Once we've gone to this point and created a memory, so something stimulates, we know it's stimulating, we're evaluating it, and we can recognize it. Oh, I know what that is. And then you've got that now as a memory, all right? And you also associate with that value judgments. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it right? Is it wrong? Up. And these become metaphors that we'll talk about as a little bit, all right? So this is the process that we all go through. So when you learn to like a new wine or a new herb or a new sensation, when you maybe didn't like sushi and you learn to love it, the changes are not in your palate, but they're neurological. It's neuroplasticity. It's your brain now associating something that was negative to something that's positive, a reinforcement, an aspiration, or those kind of things. All right. And so this also explains. It's an acquired taste. This is the process of acquiring a taste. This changes over time from learning, observation, peers, etc. We've got a site called myphenotype.com. It's fun. You go into here, you take the little quiz. We ask you about salt. One of the things that we found is people who love salt, people dumping salt on their food before they even taste it. Number one sign you've got more taste buds. Salt suppresses bitterness. We'll talk about this in terms of wine and food. And the people who have the most taste buds usually have a heightened sensitivity to bitterness, and take the bitter pill with a grain of salt. That's actually ancient evidence of knowing that salt suppresses bitterness. And they know they need it, all right? And then there's health. You may have been like that, but then you learn to associate too much salt with hypertension or death or heart disease and whatever. So you learn to not like salt because of a negative association. So remember, acquiring a taste is through positive reinforcement. Disposing of a taste is through negative reinforcement. And we take the macro world market and define the consumers in 4 groups. Consumers who love sweet wine, that's all we need to know. And typically, by far, they have the highest perceptive or sensory acuity of anybody. They're not unsophisticated, they're not unstable, they're not uneducated, etc., as in Fraser. Hypersensitive is the next group of people, and the hypersensitive phenotypes have a lot of taste buds, cannot tolerate too much alcohol. They might like red, but more typically they like white. And they also love that little bit of residual sugar that's found in modern Chardonnays or Pinot Noirs or just about any red wine that the critics hate, but the consumers love. But consumers are so afraid and lack confidence to say, I want a sweet wine, shut up and bring me what I like, you moron. So they would rather talk dry but drink sweet. And so when you see a dry Riesling, if you see dry on any bottle of wine, that's usually an indication it's actually more sweet than other wines. We'll get into that later. Sensitive phenotypes are kind of the middle group, if you will, and very, very adventurous in flavors and in life in general and whatever. They have a harder time making up their mind because they're very contextual. They've got to find something to help them make a decision. So, oh, it's summer, I want white wine. It's winter, I want red. I'm having beef, I'll have red. I'm having fish, I'll have white, that kind of thing. So very contextual and indecisive. And then the tolerant phenotype, more is better. More alcohol, more oak, more extraction, more. And the tolerant phenotypes, okay, so as a breakdown, let me see. No, I thought I had that fixed. All right. So summing up a phenotype again, sensitivity, culture and learning, experiences, that's you, and that's everybody out there. And then this is a breakdown. You'll get a copy of this. The way this actually breaks down is sweet phenotypes are about 70% female, 30% male, and this is genetically consistent. But it also means that if we say, oh, that's a lady's wine or this or that, we're ignoring that 30% of this is male. And the reason my book got written was because of a male sweet phenotype who was also the senior vice president of communications for Mondavi, Harvey Poster, who passed away about 2 years ago now. But Harvey came up to me at an event and he said, you've got to write a book about this. He's from Memphis. And I've known Harvey for long years, 45 years in the wine industry. And if you ever saw him at an event, he would have a cocktail, not a glass of wine in his hand. He can't stand Cabernet, can't stand Chardonnay, loves Moscato, loves White Zinfandel, and is representative, again, of millions of men who love sweet wines. Hypersensitive is, you can almost consider sweet and hypersensitive one bigger group because they really have a lot of the same physiology. They have a lot of the same general kind of preferences. But the big difference is that the hypersensitive wants dry wine, or at least tells you they want dry wine, but the wine they really like is sweet, okay, as I said before. And so this Pinot Grigio is big for the hypersensitive. Really smooth red blends is a big opportunity to target hypersensitive. And to make a wine that's not going to appeal to the tolerant crowd, it won't get the Parker points, but look at what Apothic Red and Meiomi Pinot Noir and those kind of things. This is where they're hitting. All right, sensitive, and so combined, this distribution on this is both about 70% female, 30% male, and it's potentially 50% of the total available market, 50%, and in Asia it's about 70% because it's known genetically bitter sensitivity and alcohol sensitivity and something called aldehyde dehydrogenase deficiency disorder, all right, which is when you drink alcohol, you flush, you get drunk really easily. It's much higher in Asia than it is in the US or Europe, and that's known. So big market in the wine industry tends to put all their focus over here, all right? But this is where the action is in new brands and in building business. So you may want to build your, high-end red wine, go into Parker, go into the Wine Spectator wine experience, that kind of stuff. Good on you. But it's a crowded market, and it's actually a vast minority of consumers. And then the sensitive, this is about 35%, a little bit male dominant, but pretty equal distribution, male and female. And they tend to be less brand loyal. These are, by the way, the sweet phenotypes are the most brand loyal people in the world. And that's not just wine, that's underwear, that's tagless t-shirts. They can't stand the tags in their clothes, that kind of stuff. Tolerant, 15% of the market, virtually, from a genetic standpoint, virtually all male, okay? And linear thinkers, bottom line oriented, just give me the points, that's it. Thank you very much, more, bigger, better, faster. So that this group also tends to be the most financially successful. These people, sweet and hypersensitive phenotypes, tend to be graphic artists and that kind of stuff. All right. So comparative selling, without getting too far into it today, the word dessert wine was invented by the US feds after Prohibition to close a tax loophole. All of the really, really, really sweet wines of France and of Germany, the ice wines, the sauternes, and so forth, those were table wines. And it's only recent, this is our conscientious stupidity. We just don't know that these weren't dessert wines. But there are certain wines then that you can start to see, oh, okay, now I can start to visualize who this market is, what they want, what their behaviors are. When you see this, most people are going to see some green or some yellowy green over here. It doesn't even exist. This is an illusion. And so much of wine is an illusion. But if you see this little blue over here, it becomes green looking when it's between these orange lines versus between the purple. There is no green. It's your brain makes it up. So this is part of the neurology of sensations and why, oh, I had such a great time at the winery and I bought this wine and I got it home and it didn't travel well. It's not as good. Well, it's actually the probability that your metabolism, your perception was skewed by being in the tasting room on vacation maybe or whatever. Now you're home and the kids and traffic and work and blah, blah, and your perception is shifted. And same goes with a lot of wine and food and what's going on. Some people look at this and they'll see a number 8. Some people will only see a number 3. And some people don't see any number in here. That's color blindness. So this is a neurological phenomenon. This is a genetic phenomenon, okay? And in both cases, different people experience different things. Our brains can exaggerate certain things. You won't want to believe it, but this table is the exact dimensions of length and width as this. So this sure looks wider and sure looks shorter, but in reality, it's not. And as a matter of fact, this one's narrower. And so what they've done is the legs give you your brain scrambles because it can't understand this. And this one doesn't even look like, because it should be getting narrower in the back and whatever. All right. So this is a fun exploration. This is something fun to share with people. If I do a room of 100 people, about 60% of the room sees her going clockwise. About 40% see her going counterclockwise. 50% of the room will go, oh, she changed. and the other 50% will never see her change. She's not a woman, she's not spinning. This is just light on a screen that resembles the form of a woman, and her two-dimensional moving back and forth, because the way they've got her arms going makes it look like she's spinning. So it's a total illusion, and depending on which side, which hemisphere of your brain is processing the information, that determines the illusion of which direction she's spinning or not. And if you see her change directions, it's not her changing, it's you changing. And nobody goes, oh, look, I changed. Never heard that. And I've done this with tens of thousands of people all around the world, okay? Now, marketing is working to have control over the illusions so you don't mistakenly send the wrong impression or make the wrong impression, all right? So imagine if you love white Zinfandel, I want you to, anybody who will try this, please do. Whatever wine region you live near or travel to next, go into a tasting room and masquerade as a white Zinfandel drinker and see how you're handled. Say, I love white Zinfandel, what do you have for me? I do this regularly, and I do it with clients, and I do it with classes, and it's embarrassing. It's really embarrassing, and that's the impression we're giving about wine, okay? So, the next thing to cover very quickly is going to be metaphors. Up is relative, it's subjective, it's not objective. If I'm pointing this way and this is up, what's going on in New Zealand is the opposite thing, or in actually Western Australia, somewhere in the Indian Ocean. Our up is somebody else's down. It's relative to where we are on the globe. And a metaphor is a physical protein connection in the brain that overrides reality. So you've been told you have heavy wine with heavy food, but the reality is that Moscato, White Zinfandel, or Blue Nun is heavier than Cabernet. I mean, it weighs more. Now, we've got our own idea of what heavy means. Oh, it means rich and complex, but that's not what it means to normal human beings. So we've justified that had the red wine with your steak because you need a heavy wine to stand up, and that's all just actually just inherently stupid. And I say this, I hope you'll have fun with this, but this is how wine and food matching works. A trout's little and white, and so of course a powerful tannic red wine would simply overwhelm it. Now, these are taken from wine and food pairing websites. Heavy food with heavy wine, hearty red meats, like absolutely require dry wine. Well, what if I don't like dry red wine? You know, isn't there something inherently stupid about this? How did we ever get this? And in our imagery, in our neural program, tuna is much closer to being like a cow than like a trout. And what about chicken? Oh, well, what about chicken cooked over an open fire? Because, you know, fire. And this is how we come up with wine and food pairing. And most of it is absolutely back-asswards wrong. I'm telling you this, and I'm going to give you some things to try. So this idea that our palates mature over time, and I'm drinking red wines, look at me, if you started not drinking red wine and easily ascended to strong red wine, there's probably some genetic characteristics that supported that transition. But it's not from your palate changing, it's from your neurology changing. And then there are others who will never, ever prescribe to, I want a dry red wine with my steak, because they just simply can't stand it. And it's millions, it's actually probably the majority of the market. But yet it's a cliche that's off the top of everybody's mind like that, okay? So here's how this gastronomic programming starts. I'm going to show you a picture of some Sauvignon Blancs, Cloudy Bay and Silex and a white Bordeaux. That's actually mostly Sauvignon Blanc. And I can predict how a room full of wine experts will describe it, and grass is one of the words that comes up. Now, we've got And there are actually molecules in grass that are in Sauvignon Blanc. They're called pyrazines. And what's kind of cool about this, we find that experiences with lawns and lawn mowing can have a profound effect on the memories, the impression that you have of grass and how you like or don't like Sauvignon Blanc. Yay. What happened in your senior year of high school, in that summer following graduation from high school, has an effect on a lot of people on what they think of Sauvignon Blanc. If it was a happy summer and you're making out on lawn, and it's positive, that's a positive association to pyrazines. If she dumped you and left you for another college and the love of your life went away forever, it could be a very negative. So it's just hysterical how this works. Did the kid hit the ball or did he miss? Do you have grass allergies? Boy, if you have grass allergies, you can overcome it. You can neurologically shift it. But a lot of people, when they first get Sauvignon Blanc, if it's got the pyrazines and that characteristic, their brain's just saying, get away, all right? So there you go. And this was me in college. I was carrying culinary herbs, but the police thought it was something else. So, all right. So just to wrap this up, sensory sensitivity, your life experience, your learning, observation, your culture and environment, and this goes far, far beyond wine. This is just not wine. This is so many things that we relate to in life. All right. So what we're now able to do is start to look at basic inclinations that are changeable over time, but answering the question, where should I start? Well, you know, maybe you should start with a sweet wine, and there's all sorts of stuff for you to try. And if you like white Zinfandel, I can get you a lower alcohol, really cool Lambrusco. They're out there. Nobody knows how to sell them or who to sell them to. And the market you could sell them to so distrusts wine experts, they're not even interested in your recommendation. So this is, again, how we can understand, embrace, and cultivate the market. All right, and then we get into delicate whites and reds and rosés, and then more intensity, typically higher alcohol, more bitterness, more astringency, and then where things are dominated in the price categories and whatever are in that association, the metaphorical association with more is better. All right. So what we're saying, and to sum it up, is that what if it was like when you walk into a shoe store, that you want to be in a shoe store where somebody understands people have different size feet, and that they're personally going to help. They're not going to say you're immature or unsophisticated because of your shoe size, but you do want something that fits, that's comfortable for you. Something may fit the shoe salesman or a group of shoe experts, but what do you care? You need it to fit for you. So we're talking about personalizing the experience and helping people find a wine they'll love. All right. Now, a little later we can do the wine and food bit, but for now that's the perception end of it. And a couple things I want you to do: cook a steak, rare, a good quality steak, and have a red wine. And don't season the steak, none, no seasoning. And if you brush it with a little oil, use unsalted butter or olive oil or canola oil, okay? So no salt. Grill the steak, get it really nice, just the way it's perfect with red wine. Take a sip of red wine, try the fat, try the red wine. It does not smooth the tannins, it makes the wine more astringent. What we say about red wine and fat is a lie. It's just wrong. And try unsalted butter, try canola oil, try lard, try any lamb fat with no salt on it, and you will get the same result. All right, that's number one. Take a bite of the meat, and it's got proteins and it's got umamis or umami taste, and that umami is actually associated with protein, and umami in the meat plus the fat in the meat. Try your wine, try the rare steak, It'll make your wine more bitter, more sour, less pleasant, more astringent. It does not smooth it out. Now, there's a chemical association and ionic bonds and denaturing of proteins that happens in wine and in your saliva, but it does not happen when you have red wine with red meat. Put some salt on the steak, or if even better, do what they do in Italy, some salt and some lemon, smooth as silk. Do that, try an unsalted piece of salmon with Pinot Noir, it absolutely sucks. The umami and the oil, the fat, again, no salt, makes the wine just horribly bitter. And most people that find they actually prefer a Cabernet, for some reason, it's a little bit less pronounced because of the bitter reaction of Pinot Noir. But there's no natural affinity. Put salt and lemon on it, problem solved. And so you'll find in the cuisines of Europe, salt and acidity are an integral part of every cuisine, from Alsace to Burgundy to Tuscany to Bordeaux to Germany to Spain and anywhere else in Europe. And we've created this monster of wine and food pairing that is absolutely ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And people just so passionately love to do it. All right. So anyways, that's our presentation for today. Hope you enjoyed it. And we'll dive off into the wine and food thing. If anybody has an interest, we can cover that on Monday. Okay? Thank you all so much. And hope to see some people on the call next time. And it's never a problem if you don't. And talk to you soon. Thanks.